The napkin was folded into a perfect, sharp triangle, hiding the 7 words that would cost a woman her life and save a dynasty. Caleb Sterling, the man whose software quietly ran half the Pentagon, didn't blink when he felt the stiff paper slide against his palm beneath the table. He didn't look at the waitress. He didn't look at the woman smiling across from him, the woman who had just sold him to his enemies for a seat on a board that didn't exist yet. He simply took a sip of his 1999 Romane Conti, tapped the side of his glass twice, and prepared for war. Audrey adjusted the cuffs of her starch-white shirt, checking her reflection in the polished brass of the service station. In the world of the Obsidian, a Manhattan dining room so exclusive it didn't have a listed phone number, invisibility was the highest currency. To be a waitress here wasn't just about serving food, it was about being a phantom. You had to anticipate a desire before the guest's brain had fully formed it. You had to fill a water glass without breaking a conversation. You had to see everything and say nothing. Audrey was good at it. At 24, she was the youngest floor staff member in the restaurant's history. She needed this job. The tips from a single night could cover her rent in Queens for 3 months. Losing this position wasn't an option. Table 4, the maître d', Henri, whispered as he glided past her. Sterling is seated. The girl is with him. Do not hover. Caleb Sterling. The name carried weight even in a room full of heavyweights. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was an architect of the modern defense industry. His company, Aegis Systems, built the firewalls that kept power grids running and the drones that patrolled borders. He was 34, sharp-jawed, and terrifyingly intelligent, and he was currently sitting with Vanessa Hart. Audrey moved toward table 4 with a bottle of sparkling water, her steps silent on the plush carpet. Vanessa was stunning, a former model turned art consultant with eyes like polished jade and a reputation for climbing ladders that didn't belong to her. She was leaning forward, her hand resting over Caleb's, laughing at something he'd said. It looked like love. To anyone else in the room, it looked like a power couple celebrating an anniversary. But Audrey saw the tension in Vanessa's shoulders. She saw the way Vanessa's eyes darted to the entrance every time the heavy oak doors opened. Audrey poured the water, her arm extended in the perfect open-hand service technique she had practiced for thousands of hours. Neither of them looked at her. I'm just saying, Caleb, Vanessa purred, her voice low. The Tokyo deal can wait. You need a break. Let's take the jet to Aspen tonight. Just us. No security detail. No noise. Caleb smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know I can't move without the detail, Van. Company policy, especially with the shareholders' vote next week. Live a little, she teased, retracting her hand to pick up her wine. Sometimes I feel like you trust your bodyguards more than you trust me. Audrey finished pouring and stepped back, blending into the shadows of a marble pillar. She watched them for a moment longer before turning toward the kitchen. As she passed the service corridor leading to the private restrooms, she heard a voice. It was sharp, hushed, and urgent. Audrey paused. The corridor was empty, save for the faint sound of jazz filtering in from the dining room. The voice was coming from the VIP powder room, a single-occupancy restroom with gold leaf wallpaper. The door wasn't fully latched. I'm telling you, he's resisting, the voice hissed. It was Vanessa. She must have slipped away while Audrey was at the station fetching bread. But Audrey had just seen her at the table? No. Audrey glanced back at table 4. The seat was empty. Caleb was checking his phone. Audrey froze. She knew she should keep walking. Overhearing a guest was a fireable offense. But the tone of Vanessa's voice stopped her cold. It wasn't the voice of a loving girlfriend. It was the voice of a broker closing a deal. No, Gideon, listen to me, Vanessa whispered. her voice trembling slightly with adrenaline. "I can't get him to Aspen. He's too paranoid. You have to do it here." Audrey pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Gideon? Gideon Graves? The corporate raider who had been trying to hostile take over Aegis Systems for 2 years. "I don't care if it's risky," Vanessa snapped. "He's at the Obsidian. The security is tight, but they stay at the perimeter. He's exposed at the table. If your team is in position, take him when he exits to the car. I'll stall the lead agent." A pause. "Yes. I sent the route. I sent the frequency for his details comms. You have everything. Just make sure my transfer is in the Cayman account by morning. If I do this, I'm burning a bridge I can never cross back." Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was a hit, an extraction. They were going to grab Caleb Sterling, likely to force him to sign over his majority shares or worse. "They're in position? Good," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I'm going back out. Don't miss." The click of the lock turning jolted Audrey into motion. She sprinted silently on the balls of her feet, ducking into the kitchen just as the restroom door opened. She grabbed a basket of warm sourdough, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the silver tongs. She had a choice. If she did nothing, Caleb Sterling would walk out those doors and vanish. If she told the manager, Henry would likely fire her for spying and dismiss it as nonsense. You didn't accuse a billionaire's girlfriend of treason without proof. If she tried to tell Caleb directly, Vanessa would deny it, make a scene, and Audrey would be escorted out by security before she finished the sentence. She looked at the POS system where the orders were printed. Table 4. Appetizers were cleared. Entrees were 5 minutes out. She had 5 minutes to save a man who didn't know she existed. Audrey grabbed a pen from her apron pocket. She tore a small, pristine strip of thermal paper from the back of a duplicate receipt. Her hand hovered over the paper. She needed to be concise. She needed to be believable. She wrote 10 words. "Your girlfriend sold you out. They're in position. Trust no one." She folded the paper into a tiny square, smaller than a mint. Then she slid it underneath the base of the crystal wine glass she was preparing to refill. She took a deep breath, smoothing her apron. The kitchen clamor, chefs shouting, "Yes, chef!" The clatter of pans, the hiss of searing steak, faded into a dull roar. She walked back out onto the floor. Vanessa was back at the table. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed with a believable imitation of romance. She was touching Caleb's arm again. "Sorry, darling," Vanessa said, loud enough for Audrey to hear as she approached. "Just freshening up. You were saying about the merger." "I was saying it's going to be a bloodbath," Caleb replied, his voice calm. Audrey approached the table. This was it. The move had to be flawless. The dining room of the Obsidian was a theater, and Audrey was about to break the fourth wall. She approached table 4 from Caleb's right side. The etiquette was strict. Pour from the right, clear from the right, never cross the midline of the guest. She held the bottle of San Pellegrino in her right hand, a linen napkin draped over her left wrist. "More water, sir?" she asked softly. Caleb nodded, not looking up from his steak knife, which he was using to dissect a conversation rather than his fillet. "Please." Audrey leaned in. As she tilted the bottle, her left hand, the one hidden beneath the linen napkin, moved with the precision of a magician. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a student of observation. She knew Caleb was left-handed. He kept his wine glass slightly to the left of his center setting. As she poured the water with her right hand, she used her left to adjust the coaster of his wine glass. It was a micrometer of a movement. "Pardon me, sir," she murmured, just catching a drop. She slid the folded note from her palm, trapping it between the heavy crystal base of the wine glass and the white tablecloth. It was invisible to Vanessa, who sat opposite him. It was invisible to the security guard standing by the front entrance, scanning the room. But to Caleb, who was currently staring directly at the stem of his glass, the sudden appearance of the white square was impossible to miss. Audrey finished pouring. She retracted her hand, bowed her head slightly, and stepped back into the gloom. Her heart was thumping so loudly, she was sure the microphone in Caleb's lapel pin could pick it up. She retreated to the service station, pretending to polish a fork, but her eyes were locked on table 4. Caleb Sterling didn't react immediately. That was the first sign that Audrey wasn't dealing with a normal man. A normal man would have frowned, picked it up, asked, "What is this?" Caleb didn't. He paused. He took a bite of his fillet. He chewed slowly, his eyes fixed on Vanessa's face. He was analyzing her. He was looking for the cracks Audrey had seen in the hallway. Then, casually, as if checking the vintage of the wine, he lifted the glass. His fingers deftly palmed the note. He brought the glass to his lips, and in that split second, he unfolded the paper in his lap, below the table line. Audrey held her breath. Caleb's gaze dropped for a fraction of a second. He read it. When he looked up, his face was a mask of stone. But his eyes, they had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating computation. He looked at Vanessa. "You know," Caleb said, his voice level, "you were right about Aspen." Vanessa blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. "I was?" "Yes," Caleb continued. He reached for his wine again, his thumb brushing the stem. "New York is suffocating. Maybe we should leave tonight. Right now, in fact." Vanessa's smile faltered for a microsecond. "Right now? But we haven't finished dinner, and the car isn't." "I'll call the car around," Caleb said. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. "I'll have the driver meet us at the back exit. Less paparazzi." Audrey saw Vanessa's hand tighten on her clutch. The back exit? The plan, the position Audrey had overheard, was likely set for the front or the main garage. A change in venue would ruin the ambush. "No," Vanessa said, a little too quickly. She laughed nervously. "Don't be silly, Caleb. The front is fine. The security team has it secured. Why make them scramble?" "I pay them to scramble," Caleb said. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was texting without looking, his thumb moving rapidly across the screen. He was testing her, and she was failing. Suddenly Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. He looked up, and for the first time all night, his eyes locked directly onto Audrey's. It wasn't a look of gratitude. It was a look of assessment. "Who are you?" it asked. "And why did you do this?" He gave her the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. Then he stood up. "Vanessa," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all pretense of affection. "We're leaving. Now." "Caleb, what is going on?" Vanessa stood up too, her voice rising. "You're acting strange." "Sit down, Vanessa," Caleb said. "What?" I said, "Sit down." The command was so forceful that half the restaurant turned to look. Vanessa froze. At that exact moment, the heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant swung open. But it wasn't a guest. 3 men in dark suits walked in. They didn't look like diners. They moved with a tactical heavy-footedness that screamed trouble. They weren't Caleb's security. They were scanning the room. Vanessa saw them. Her eyes went wide. "They're early," she whispered, terrified. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. Caleb heard it. He grabbed a steak knife from the table, not aggressively, but defensively. He looked at Audrey again. He pointed to the kitchen door. "Run," his eyes said. But Audrey didn't run. because the lead man in the suit had just locked eyes with Caleb, and his hand was reaching into his jacket. "Security!" Caleb roared, shattering the quiet ambience of the restaurant. Chaos erupted. Caleb's personal detail, stationed at the bar, drew their weapons. The three intruders drew theirs. Screams pierced the air as diners dove under tables. Expensive crystal shattered. "Get down!" Caleb shoved Vanessa aside, not to save her, but to clear his line of sight. He flipped the heavy oak table onto its side, creating a barricade. "Waitress!" Caleb yelled. Audrey was frozen near the service station. "The kitchen!" Caleb shouted at her. "Is there a service elevator?" "Yes!" Audrey screamed back, her training kicking in. "Through the pantry! Go!" Caleb vaulted over the overturned table, staying low. He didn't run away from the danger. He ran toward Audrey. Bullets chewed into the mahogany paneling above Audrey's head. She dropped to the floor, crawling toward the kitchen swing doors. She felt a strong hand grab the back of her uniform and haul her up. It was Caleb. "You wrote the note," he said, his voice calm amidst the gunfire. "Yes," she gasped. "Then you just became the most important asset I have," he said grimly. "If they get me, they kill you too. Move." He shoved her through the kitchen doors just as the glass partition behind them exploded into 1,000 diamonds. The kitchen of the Obsidian was a finely tuned machine, a labyrinth of stainless steel, roaring wolf ranges, and shouting line cooks. When Caleb Sterling and Audrey burst through the swing doors, that machine ground to a halt. "Move!" Caleb barked, shoving a bewildered sous chef aside. Behind them, the dining room was a war zone. The muffled thwump-thwump of suppressed gunfire was getting louder. The mercenaries weren't just spraying bullets. They were advancing. They were professionals. "The service elevator!" Caleb grabbed Audrey's arm, his grip bruising. "You said there's an elevator." "It's too slow," Audrey yelled, her voice cracking. "It opens into the lobby. They'll be waiting there." Caleb stopped, his eyes scanning the chaotic kitchen. He looked at Audrey. For the first time, he really looked at her. Her bun was coming undone, strands of blonde hair falling over a face pale with terror, but her eyes were sharp. She knew this building. He didn't. "Where then?" he demanded. "The loading dock," Audrey said. "Through the butchery. Lead." Audrey didn't hesitate. She scrambled over a prep station covered in flour, sliding across the surface. Caleb followed, his bespoke Italian suit instantly ruined by a layer of semolina. The kitchen doors behind them swung open violently. Two men in tactical gear entered. They didn't shout. They simply raised their weapons, Heckler & Koch MP5s, compact and deadly. "Down!" Caleb tackled Audrey, driving her into the hard tile floor behind a heavy Hobart dough mixer. Bullets sparked against the stainless steel machinery, sending jagged shrapnel flying. The kitchen staff screamed and scattered, diving beneath sinks and prep tables. Caleb reached into his jacket. He didn't have a gun. He had a fountain pen and a phone that was currently vibrating with a threat-detected alert from his own software. "We can't stay here," Caleb hissed. He looked at a rack of heavy cast-iron skillets hanging above the prep station. "Can you run?" he asked her. "I'm a waitress in Manhattan," Audrey snapped, adrenaline overriding her fear. "I run 10 miles a shift." "Good." Caleb grabbed a canister of industrial cooking spray from the counter. He hurled it over the dough mixer toward the open range of the grill station. The canister hit the hot grill. It took 3 seconds. Boom! The aerosol exploded in a fireball, engulfed by the grease trap's flames. The blast wasn't enough to kill, but the sudden flash and the wall of fire disoriented the shooters. The sprinkler system triggered instantly, dousing the kitchen in a curtain of grey, filthy water. "Now!" Caleb hauled Audrey up. They sprinted through the blinding spray. Audrey took a sharp left, dragging Caleb through the plastic strip curtains into the walk-in butchery. The temperature plummeted. Carcasses of dry-aged beef hung from hooks like silent sentinels. "Out the back," Audrey gasped, pointing to a heavy steel door with a push bar. They slammed into the door, bursting out into the alleyway. The New York night air was cold and smelled of garbage and wet pavement. The alley was narrow, lined with dumpsters and the back entrances of other buildings. "My car," Caleb said, scanning the end of the alley. "My extraction team should be—" He stopped. At the mouth of the alley, a black Cadillac Escalade was idling. The driver's side window was shattered. The driver, Caleb's head of security, a man named Miller, was slumped over the wheel, motionless. "They killed Miller," Caleb said. His voice was devoid of emotion, a terrifying calm settling over him. They knew the extraction point. "Oh my God!" Audrey covered her mouth. "Do you have a car?" Caleb turned to her. "I take the subway," she whispered. "Not tonight, you don't." The metal door behind them rattled. The shooters were coming through the butchery. Caleb scanned the alley. It was a dead end for vehicles, blocked by the Escalade. There was a delivery van parked near the dumpsters, a beat-up Ford Transit with "Sal's Seafood" painted on the side. The driver was nowhere to be seen, likely smoking out front or hiding inside the Obsidian. Caleb ran to the van. The door was locked. He didn't fumble for wires. He pulled out his phone, tapped an app icon that looked like a simple calculator, and held the device near the van's electronic lock mechanism. "What are you doing?" Audrey screamed. "They're coming." "Modern delivery fleets use RFID tags for fleet management," Caleb muttered, his thumb flying across the screen. "Aegis Systems wrote the encryption for Ford's commercial line." Click. The lock disengaged. "Get in!" Caleb threw the driver's door open and vaulted into the seat. Audrey scrambled into the passenger side just as the butchery door banged open. The two shooters spilled into the alley. They saw the van. They raised their weapons. Caleb jammed his thumb onto the ignition button, bypassed by his phone hack, and stomped on the gas. The van didn't go forward. He threw it into reverse. The heavy vehicle lurched backward, slamming violently into the two men just as they opened fire. The impact crunched bone against the brick wall of the restaurant. Caleb shifted gears, tires screeching on the wet asphalt, and peeled out of the alley, clipping the side of the dead Escalade. They shot out onto the street, merging recklessly into the chaotic Friday night traffic of Tribeca. Audrey sat frozen, gripping the dashboard. Her white shirt was stained with grease, water, and blood that wasn't hers. "Are you hit?" Caleb asked, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Audrey checked herself. No, I don't think so." "Check the glove box," Caleb ordered. "Tell me what's in there." Audrey opened it. Manifests, a tire gauge, a box of plastic forks. No weapon. Great. Caleb took a sharp right, running a red light. Horns blared around them. "We're compromised. My personal detail is dead or turned. Vanessa signaled the team. That means they have access to my primary comms." He rolled down his window. "Give me your phone," he said. "What? I need to call the police." "The police operate on a dispatch system that my company monitors," Caleb said grimly. "And if my enemies have access to my company, they have access to the 911 dispatch location data. They will intercept the call before a squad car even gets rolling. Give me the phone." Audrey hesitated, then handed over her cracked iPhone. Caleb took it, along with his own multi-$1,000 prototype device. He held them both out the window and dropped them. They shattered on the pavement, instantly run over by a taxi behind them. "We are now invisible," Caleb said, rolling the window up. "And we are entirely on our own." They drove for an hour. Caleb navigated the city like a chessboard, avoiding the surveillance-heavy zones of Midtown and the toll readers of the tunnels. He stuck to the side streets of Queens, weaving through industrial parks and residential rows where the cameras were broken or non-existent. He finally pulled the seafood van into a derelict garage in Long Island City. The sign above the door read, Sterling and Codele Logistics, defunct. "What is this place?" Audrey asked, her voice trembling. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, shaking shock. "A shell company I bought 5 years ago for tax purposes," Caleb said, killing the engine. "It owns this building. No utilities, no digital footprint. It's off the grid." He got out and walked around to her door. He opened it and offered a hand. His demeanor had shifted. The panic of the restaurant was gone, replaced by the cool, detached efficiency of a CEO managing a crisis. "Come inside, it's safe." Audrey stepped out. Her legs felt like jelly. She followed him into the warehouse. It was empty, save for a single heavy steel container in the center of the floor, like a shipping crate converted into an office. Caleb unlocked the container with a physical key he pulled from a hidden pocket in his belt. Inside, it was a stark contrast to the grime outside. Sleek, climate-controlled, with a cot, a wall of monitors, currently dark, and a small kitchenette. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a chair. He went to a metal cabinet, pulled out a medical kit and a bottle of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses. "Drink." Audrey took the glass. She downed it in one burn. It helped. Caleb sat opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. The blood on his shirt was drying dark brown. "Now," Caleb said, his voice low and intense, "tell me everything. Word for word, don't paraphrase." "What did you hear in the restroom?" Audrey closed her eyes, trying to transport herself back to that moment. "I was passing the VIP corridor. The door wasn't latched. I heard Vanessa. Who was she talking to?" She called him Gideon. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Gideon Graves. I knew he was aggressive, but I didn't think he was suicidal. Kidnapping me implies he's desperate." She said, "I can't get him to Aspen. He's resisting. You have to do it here." Audrey opened her eyes. She said she sent the route and the frequency for your details comms. Caleb nodded slowly. "That explains how they dropped Miller so fast. They were listening to our channel." "And she mentioned money," Audrey added. She said, "Just make sure my transfer is in the Cayman account by morning." Caleb froze. "Cayman?" "Yes." She said, "If I do this, I'm burning a bridge I can never cross back." Caleb stood up and paced the small room. "Cayman. Vanessa doesn't have a Cayman account. I ran a background check on her finances 6 months ago when we started dating. She banks with Credit Suisse in Zurich." He turned to the wall of dark monitors. He flipped a breaker switch. The screens hummed to life. This wasn't connected to the internet. It was a localized server hardwired into the building's own satellite uplink, a private connection Caleb had built himself. "If she has a Cayman account," Caleb muttered, typing furiously on a keyboard, "it means she didn't just open it. It means someone opened it for her." He pulled up a complex web of banking nodes. "Audrey," Caleb said, not looking back, "you might have just saved my life, but you also just handed me a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. What do you mean?" "Gideon Graves is a corporate raider. He deals in hostile takeovers using leverage and debt. He doesn't use Cayman accounts. That's too sloppy for him. The Cayman Islands." Caleb paused, a realization dawning on his face. "That's the signature of the Sovereign Consortium." "The who?" "A group of shadow investors. They don't buy companies. They dismantle nations' infrastructures for profit. They've been trying to get the source code for Aegis's ballistic defense shield for a decade." Caleb turned around. His face was pale. "Vanessa wasn't selling me to Gideon Graves," he whispered. "She was selling me to the consortium. Gideon is just the middleman, the distraction." So, what does that mean? Audrey asked. It means, Caleb said, walking over to her and looking her dead in the eye, that Gideon didn't want to kidnap me for ransom. He wanted my biometrics. Your fingerprints? My retinas, my voice print, my pulse signature. Caleb tapped his chest. The Aegis mainframe, the system that controls 40% of the US power grid security, is locked by a bio key that only I possess. If they have me, they can force the unlock. He looked at the digital clock on the wall. They missed the extraction at the restaurant. That means Plan A failed. Suddenly, the screens on the wall flickered. A red banner flashed across the center monitor. System lockdown initiated. Unpermitted user detected. Caleb's eyes went wide. No, he typed frantically. Access denied. Access denied. What's happening? Audrey stood up. They're scrubbing me, Caleb said, his voice rising in disbelief. They aren't just locking me out. They are declaring me dead. He pointed to the screen. A news ticker from a major network feed was displayed. Breaking news. Billionaire Caleb Sterling confirmed dead in Manhattan restaurant shooting. Suspects at large. I'm not dead, Caleb yelled at the screen. They faked it, Audrey realized. Why? Because if I'm dead, Caleb said, stepping back from the console, my shares automatically transfer to a living trust, a trust managed by the next of kin or the designated partner. Vanessa, Audrey breathed. She doesn't just get paid, Caleb said, realizing the horror of the situation. She gets the company. She gets the keys to the castle. She doesn't need my retinas if she owns the board. Caleb sank into the chair, putting his head in his hands. They won. It's over. By tomorrow morning, she'll hand the keys to the consortium, and they'll dismantle the US cyber defense grid before lunch. The room fell silent. The hum of the servers seemed like a funeral dirge. Audrey looked at the man who was supposed to be the smartest person in the room, now defeated. She looked at her dirty uniform, her stained hands. She thought about her rent, her struggle, the way people like Vanessa looked through her as if she were made of glass. No, Audrey said. Caleb looked up. What? No, Audrey repeated, firmer this time. You're the genius, right? You built the system? Yes, but nothing. You built it. That means you know where the back door is. There is no back door. I made sure of it. There's always a back door, Audrey said, stepping closer to him. In every kitchen, there's a door the health inspector doesn't check. In every restaurant, there's a ledger the taxman doesn't see. You're telling me you built $1 billion empire, and you didn't leave yourself a way in that she doesn't know about. Caleb looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire he used to have before the money, before the board meetings. He stood up slowly. There is one way, he said softly. But it's impossible. Try me. The God key. It's a physical override drive. It resets the biometrics, but it's not digital. It's hardware. Where is it? It's in a safety deposit box, Caleb said, inside the vault of the First Republic Bank on Wall Street. Okay, Audrey shrugged. So we go get it. Audrey, I am legally dead. My face is on every news channel. The police are looking for my killer, and the consortium is looking for my body. I can't just walk into a bank. You can't, Audrey said. She reached up and pulled the pin from her hair, letting the messy blonde waves fall around her shoulders. She grabbed a napkin from the table and began wiping the grease from her face. But I can, she said. I'm nobody. I'm invisible, remember? Caleb stared at her. A slow, dangerous smile began to form on his lips. We need to get you a makeover, Caleb said, and we need to plan a heist. The warehouse in Long Island City was silent, save for the hum of the cooling fans on Caleb's server rack. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was beginning to metabolize into a cold, hard resolve. Caleb opened a tall, gunmetal grey locker at the back of the shipping container. It wasn't filled with weapons, as Audrey had expected. It was filled with identities. "I built this safe house for a scenario where I had to disappear," Caleb explained, pulling out a garment bag and a heavy silver case. "I assumed I would be the one running. I never anticipated I'd need to send a proxy." He tossed the garment bag onto the cot. "Put this on. It's a Chanel tweed suit, vintage 1990. Conservative, expensive, boring. It screams old money. Old money doesn't get questioned." Audrey unzipped the bag. It was a navy blue skirt suit with gold buttons. "How do you have this?" "My mother's size," Caleb said, his voice momentarily soft before hardening again. "She taught me that the best camouflage isn't invisibility, it's unremarkability. You need to look like a woman who owns the building, not the one who cleans it." While Audrey changed in the small bathroom, Caleb went to work on the silver case. Inside was a compact, high-resolution ID printer and a stack of blank polycarbonate cards. He sat at the computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He wasn't just typing, he was sculpting a digital ghost. "Your name is Catherine Prynne," Caleb called out. "You are the executor of the Obscura Trust. It's a blind trust I set up 7 years ago. It has no direct link to Caleb Sterling, no link to Aegis Systems. It exists solely to pay the rent on a safety deposit box at the First Republic Bank on Wall Street." Audrey emerged from the bathroom. The suit was a little loose in the waist, but the cut was impeccable. She looked taller, sharper. But her hair, messy, blonde, and smelling of kitchen grease, ruined the illusion. Caleb spun his chair around. He looked her up and down, critically. "The clothes work, the face works, the hair is a liability." He stood up and grabbed a pair of medical shears from the first aid kit. Audrey instinctively took a step back. "What are you doing?" "You're a waitress at the Obsidian," Caleb said, walking toward her. "Vanessa has seen you. The security team has seen you. If you walk into that bank with that hair, and anyone from the consortium is watching the feed, facial recognition might miss you, but the profile won't." He held up the shears. "We need to change the silhouette." Audrey swallowed hard. Her hair was the one thing she felt she owned in a life where she rented everything else. But she thought about the man dead in the alleyway. She thought about the arrogance of Vanessa Hart. "Do it," she whispered. Caleb placed a chair in the center of the room. "Sit." For the next 20 minutes, the billionaire software architect became a stylist. He didn't cut with the flair of a salon artist. He cut with the precision of an engineer removing excess material. He sheared her long, wavy locks into a sharp, severe bob that hit just below her jawline. When he was done, he handed her a bottle of dark brown hair dye from the supply kit. "The sink is in the back. You have 10 minutes. When Audrey looked in the mirror 15 minutes later, she didn't recognize herself. The brunette bob framed her face, making her cheekbones pop and her blue eyes look piercingly bright. She looked severe. She looked like a woman who fired people for sport. She walked back out. Caleb was holding a freshly printed driver's license and a black Amex card. "Catherine Prynne," he said, handing her the ID. "You are cold, impatient, and you have a flight to Zurich in 3 hours. You are not there to chat. You are there to retrieve an asset from Box 404. "What's in the box?" Audrey asked, tucking the ID into the clutch he provided. "The God key," Caleb said. "It looks like a simple silver cylinder, about the size of a roll of quarters. It's an analog drive. It contains the root code for Aegis. Once we have it, I can plug it into any terminal, bypass the biometric lock, and retake control of the company before the market opens tomorrow. And if I get caught—" "You won't," Caleb said, though his eyes betrayed his doubt. "Because I'll be in your ear the whole time." He handed her a tiny flesh-colored earpiece. "The bank opens in 40 minutes, Caleb said, checking his watch. "I've hacked the traffic grid to give you a green light corridor to Wall Street. You take the van. Drop it 6 blocks away. Walk the rest." "Caleb," Audrey said, pausing at the door. "Why me? You could have hired a mercenary. You know people." Caleb looked at the screens, where the news of his death was still looping. "Because," he said, turning to her. "Mercenaries can be bought. Vanessa proved that loyalty is expensive, but you saved my life for nothing. You passed a test you didn't know you were taking." He handed her the keys to the seafood van. "Go get my life back, Audrey." Wall Street was a canyon of steel and glass, teeming with the morning rush. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive coffee. Audrey walked the pavement, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the concrete. She felt exposed. Every siren made her flinch. Every police officer she passed seemed to stare at her. "Shoulders back," Caleb's voice buzzed in her ear. The audio quality was crystal clear. "Stop looking at the ground. Wealthy people look up because they own the sky. Look at the architecture." Audrey forced her chin up. She adjusted the heavy Chanel jacket. She channeled the rudest, most entitled customers she had ever served at the Obsidian. The ones who snapped their fingers. The ones who didn't say thank you. She reached the heavy revolving doors of First Republic Bank. The building was a fortress of marble and brass. "You're on camera now," Caleb whispered. "I've looped the feed for the exterior, but the interior is a closed circuit. I can't blind them inside. You have to bluff." Audrey pushed through the doors. The lobby was hushed, smelling of old paper and money. A security guard by the metal detector stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need to check your bag," he said. Audrey stopped. She didn't hand him the bag. She looked at him with a mixture of boredom and annoyance. "I am in a rush," she said, her voice dropping to a chilly register. "I have an appointment with the vault manager. If I miss my flight because you want to rifle through my personal effects, I will have your supervisor explain the delay to the board." The guard hesitated. The Chanel suit, the haircut, the sheer audacity. It worked. It was the armor of class. "Go ahead, ma'am," he mumbled, stepping back. "Good," Caleb said in her ear. "That was perfect. Now approach the desk. Ask for Mr. Henderson. He manages the high-security boxes." Audrey approached the marble counter. "Mr. Henderson, immediately." A young teller scrambled to make a call. Moments later, a balding man in a grey suit hurried out from a back office. "Ms. Prynne?" Mr. Henderson asked, glancing at the appointment slip the teller had printed, an appointment Caleb had inserted into their system 5 minutes ago. "I wasn't aware we had a scheduled visit." "My office called it in," Audrey lied smoothly. "Clearly your reception staff is lacking. I need access to box 404. Now." Of course. Right this way." Henderson led her through a heavy steel gate, down a flight of stairs, and into the subterranean level. The air here was cooler, recycled, and thin. They approached the massive circular door of the main vault. "Heart rate is spiking," Caleb warned. "Breathe, you're doing fine." Henderson scanned his badge and placed his hand on a biometric reader. The vault door groaned, the tumblers shifting with a deep, resonant thud. The door swung open. Inside, the walls were lined with thousands of metal drawers. "Box 404, Henderson muttered, walking down aisle 4. He stopped at a box at eye level. "Do you have your key, Miss Prynne?" Audrey froze. She didn't have a key. "Caleb," she hissed under her breath. "He's asking for the key." "The key is digital," Caleb replied instantly. "Tell him it's a dual authentication biometric box. Tell him to check the protocol for Obscura Holdings." "Mr. Henderson," Audrey said, raising an eyebrow, "this is a Series 9 box. It doesn't use a physical key. It requires my thumbprint and your override code. Please check your protocol." Henderson looked confused. I haven't seen a Series 9 in this section." "Check the file," Audrey commanded. Henderson pulled out his tablet. He scrolled through the data. Caleb was working on the other end, rewriting the bank's database in real time as Henderson read it. "Ah," Henderson said, his eyes widening. "My apologies. You are correct. Updated just last month. Biometric access only." He tapped a code into the keypad on the box and stepped back. "After you." Audrey stepped forward. She placed her thumb on the small glass scanner. "I'm spoofing the signal now," Caleb said. "The scanner is reading your print, but the server is receiving mine." A green light flashed. Click. The door of box 404 popped open. Audrey pulled out the metal tray. It was heavy. She carried it to the private viewing table in the corner of the vault. Henderson stood by the door, respecting her privacy. She opened the lid. Inside, resting on black velvet, was the silver cylinder. The God key. It looked innocuous, like a high-end lighter. Audrey grabbed it. Her hand closed around the cold metal. This was it, the leverage to save a life. She slipped it into a clutch. "I'm done," she said, closing the empty box. She walked back to Henderson. "Seal it." Henderson locked the box. "I hope everything was in order, Ms. Prynne." "Adequate," she said. They walked back up the stairs. Audrey felt a wave of relief washing over her. She had done it. She just needed to walk out the front door, get to the van and— "Stop!" Caleb's voice cracked in her ear. It was a shout. "Stop walking!" Audrey froze in the middle of the lobby, 10 feet from the revolving doors. "Don't look," Caleb commanded urgently. "But at your 4 o'clock, coming out of the senior loan officer's office, it's her." Audrey's blood turned to ice. She slowly turned her head, pretending to check the time on the wall clock. There, standing by a mahogany desk, was Vanessa Hart. She was dressed in black, a grieving widow's outfit, complete with a veil that was pulled back. She was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, talking to a very sympathetic-looking bank executive. Standing next to her was a man Audrey recognized from the restaurant, the lead shooter who had killed Miller. He was wearing a suit now, posing as her bodyguard. "She's trying to freeze the corporate accounts," Caleb whispered. "She's playing the bereaved fiancé to get emergency access to liquidity." Audrey was trapped. To leave the bank, she had to walk directly past them. The distance was less than 20 feet. "What do I do?" Audrey breathed. "If you run, the bodyguard will react," Caleb said. "If you stay, she might turn around. You have to walk past her. You are Catherine Prynne. You don't know who Vanessa Hart is. Walk." Audrey gripped her clutch so hard her knuckles turned white. She fixed her eyes on the revolving door. She began to move. Click, click, click. Her heels on the marble. She passed the 10-foot mark. Vanessa was still talking, her back to Audrey. "It's just so tragic," Vanessa was saying, her voice trembling theatrically. "Caleb didn't leave a will, and the company needs—" Audrey was 5 feet away. Suddenly the bodyguard turned. He was a massive man, with a scar running through his eyebrow. His eyes locked onto Audrey. He scanned her. The suit, the hair, the shoes. He didn't recognize the waitress. The transformation was too good. But then his gaze dropped. He looked at her hands. Audrey's hands were clutching the bag, but on her right wrist, just peeking out from the sleeve of the Chanel jacket, was a small, faded burn mark. A scar she had gotten 3 years ago from a hot roasting pan at a diner in Jersey. The bodyguard narrowed his eyes. He had seen that scar. Where? At the restaurant, when the waitress had poured the water. He had been watching her hands to make sure she wasn't reaching for a weapon. Audrey saw the recognition spark in his eyes. He tapped Vanessa on the shoulder. Audrey didn't wait. She abandoned the Catherine Prynne walk. She broke into a sprint. "Hey!" the bodyguard shouted. "Run!" Caleb yelled in her ear. Audrey hit the revolving door, shoving it so hard it nearly jumped its tracks. She burst out onto the sidewalk of Wall Street. "Stop her!" A voice roared behind her. Audrey didn't look back. She dove into the crowd of pedestrians, weaving through tourists and stockbrokers. She heard the heavy footsteps of the bodyguard behind her, plowing through the people like a linebacker. "Left!" Caleb shouted. "Down the subway entrance. Go!" Audrey hooked a sharp left, vaulting over a pile of trash bags and throwing herself down the stairs of the Wall Street subway station. She didn't have a Metro card. She leaped over the turnstile, her Chanel skirt tearing. "Hey, come back here!" the station agent yelled. Audrey sprinted down the platform. The rumble of an incoming train filled the air. The bodyguard appeared at the top of the stairs. He pulled a gun, silenced, but visible. The train roared into the station. The doors hissed open. Audrey threw herself inside. The bodyguard reached the platform. He raised the gun. The doors hissed shut. Audrey collapsed against the dirty plastic seat as the train jerked forward, disappearing into the dark tunnel. She clutched the silver cylinder to her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. "Audrey!" Caleb's voice was frantic. "Audrey, answer me!" "I have it," she gasped, pulling the earpiece. "I have the key, but they know I'm alive." The board meeting of Aegis Systems was taking place on the 50th floor, in a room made entirely of glass, overlooking the city that thought Caleb Sterling was dead. Vanessa Hart sat at the head of the table. She wore black silk, dabbing dry eyes with a tissue. Around her sat 12 grim-faced board members and Gideon Graves, the corporate raider representing the foreign investors. "I know this is unorthodox," Vanessa said, her voice shaking perfectly. But Caleb was paranoid. He would have wanted the company stable. This acquisition by the consortium ensures that stability. I am ready to sign over the voting rights of the Sterling Trust. Gideon slid a heavy document across the mahogany table. "Sign here, Ms. Hart, and the liquidity will be released immediately." Vanessa picked up the pen. The tip touched the paper. Boom! The heavy double doors of the boardroom didn't just open. They were kicked in. Every head turned. Gideon's security detail reached for their weapons, but they froze. Standing in the doorway was a dead man. Caleb Sterling stood there, not in a suit, but in a tactical vest he had pulled from the warehouse, his face smeared with grease, his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying fury. Beside him stood a woman with a choppy brunette bob and a torn Chanel skirt. "Put the pen down, Vanessa," Caleb said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel. "Caleb." Vanessa stood up, her face draining of color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. You're alive, but the police report..." "The police report you filed?" Caleb stepped into the room. "You were always good at fiction, Van." "He's unstable," Vanessa shrieked, pointing at him. "He's had a breakdown. Security, remove him. He's not fit to lead." Gideon Graves stood up. "Mr. Sterling, you are legally deceased. Until a coroner proves otherwise, Ms. Hart holds the proxy. Security." Two massive guards moved toward Caleb. "Audrey," Caleb said calmly. "Now." Audrey didn't hesitate. While the room was fixated on the resurrected billionaire, she had sprinted to the main presentation terminal at the side of the room. She jammed the silver cylinder, the God key, into the server port. "Accessing route directory," Audrey yelled, typing the command Caleb had taught her in the van. "Biometric override. Enter." The massive screen behind Vanessa, which had been displaying stock projections, suddenly went black. Then it turned red. System unlocked. User. Caleb Sterling. No! Vanessa screamed. Caleb looked at the guards. The building is now under my direct digital control. If you touch me, I will lock you in this room and vent the oxygen. Back. Down. The guards hesitated, then stepped back. They knew who signed their paychecks. Audrey, show them! Caleb commanded. Audrey hit the enter key. The screen shifted again. It pulled up a banking log. The log Caleb had traced back at the warehouse. It showed a wire transfer authorized 3 hours ago. Sender, Gideon Graves, Consortium. Recipient, Vanessa Hart, Cayman Holdings. Amount, 500,000. Memo, Aegis Acquisition, Extraction Fui. The room went silent. The board members looked from the screen to Vanessa. You sold us, the chairman of the board whispered, standing up. You didn't just sell the company. You sold him to be killed. It's a lie. Vanessa backed away, knocking over her chair. It's a fabrication. He hacked it. The timestamps don't lie, Vanessa, Caleb said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. He picked up the pen she had dropped. He looked at Gideon Graves. Get out of my building. If I see you in New York again, I will release your entire search history to the FBI. Gideon didn't argue. He grabbed his briefcase and fled. Caleb turned to Vanessa. She was trembling, backed against the glass wall. Caleb, please, she sobbed, the tears real this time. They forced me. I was scared. I love you. Caleb looked at her. He looked at the woman he had almost proposed to. Then he looked at Audrey, the waitress who had risked everything for a stranger, standing by the computer, exhausted, dirty, and brave. You don't love me, Vanessa, Caleb said quietly. You love the lifestyle, and you just lost both. The elevator doors pinged open. NYPD officers, summoned by Caleb's automatic system alert, swarmed the hallway. Take her, Caleb said, turning his back on her. As Vanessa was handcuffed and led away screaming, silence returned to the boardroom. The board members looked at Caleb, terrified. Meeting adjourned, Caleb said. He walked over to Audrey. He reached out and gently took the God key from her hand. You okay? He asked. Audrey let out a long breath, her legs finally giving way. Caleb caught her. I quit my job at the restaurant, she managed to laugh, though it sounded like a sob. Good, Caleb smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Because I'm looking for a new head of security, and I think you're the only person in this city I can actually trust. Audrey looked at the billionaire. I don't have any experience. You broke into a bank, outran a hit squad, and hacked a Fortune 500 company in one morning, Caleb said, offering her his arm. I'd say you're overqualified. Let's go get a burger. I know a place that doesn't require a reservation. They walked out of the boardroom together, leaving the sharks behind, stepping into a future that neither of them had ordered, but both were ready to serve. That is the story of how a single handwritten note on a napkin toppled a conspiracy and saved a life. It proves that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the billions, but the one who is paying attention. Audrey went from invisible to indispensable because she chose to act when everyone else looked away. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in Audrey's shoes and you heard that conversation in the restroom, would you have risked your life to pass that note? Or would you have stayed quiet to stay safe? Let me know your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It helps the channel immensely, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's saga. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.